Hello everybody, welcome to City Skylines, Aurelia City episode 28. We finally connected the district we've been working on for quite some time with the downtown last week in the last episode. We built around the river here using a mix of all kinds of buildings, and we also started the Elevated Parks project, which we really only just started and we need to work on it a lot more, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. The focus will be on the bigger park, and the smaller one will only get a final shape, but detailing on it will have to wait for some future episodes. We will build a residential area right on the other side of it and complete this block, so let's go. We will start doing the smaller park, even though I said that it's not going to be finished in today's episode, and it definitely won't be, but pretty much the overall shape will be finalized, and the buildings, the structures underneath it, probably also as well, because it's kind of important to finish this part in order to work on the bigger park area, because this place kind of needs to be done in order to the rest of the place to look good, right? So I decided to use that round building once more. I actually wanted to use it a lot more than just 3 times in here, because what can I say? The building is just perfect. I really want to have it absolutely everywhere. But it kind of looked, it kind of felt a bit too lazy to just put one style of building in multiple places around the city like this. And when I say multiple times, I don't mean like 2 or 3 times, because I am already doing that with all kinds of different buildings than this one. But, you know, maybe like 10 times. That probably would be a lot more than I would like. So I just decided to use it in here to kind of finalize the shape of the park, because the park kind of goes around this building, so that it looks like the park kind of respects the shapes of the buildings, of the blocks that are underneath it. So the small park in this episode will receive the final shape, like I said, it already did in here, and it will also get all kinds of buildings underneath it, all kinds of rows and buildings, so that the overall price on the surface is done. But we still need to finish some entrances to the park, to the top of the park, because obviously people need to go there. All kinds of people, not just the residents of these blocks, but it's kind of like a public space, so people are obviously allowed to go there from all kinds of places. So each side of the park really needs to have some kind of an entrance. I haven't really decided yet if it's going to be some elevators or something like that. You could have seen me place that really tall but kind of a small footprint building on the side there in that curved area, and that's kind of where I would like to put one entrance point to it, and probably something very similar on opposite sides. Maybe even with the same looking building, but we will see about that in some future episodes. Now I'm putting all kinds of pillars underneath this. First of all, the park and also the railroad in here. I'm using the same pillars over and over again for the railroad and for the parks. And for the railroad, these are actually buildings. These pillars are buildings, not procedural objects. So I can use the painter mod and repaint them and make them colorful like this, just like I did with the pillars on the opposite side of the bigger park in the previous episode. Now, unfortunately, we also got some places where the pavement, the concrete, was just a bit too much, like in here in front of this office building. I kind of don't really want to detail this place too much on the surface, because this place is kind of going to work on having like a bigger scale than just these smaller scales. So detailing these smaller scales is not really something that I want to get into too much, but in some places we just get a bit too large areas of concrete on the surface that I just need to do something about. So that's exactly what I did in here. Just put some like a cafe area in here with the tables and the pavement and some billboards and commercials in here. I will also do the same thing on the opposite side of the street when I get there and when I do the buildings in there. Now, similar situation obviously happened and had to happen for this round building, because intersections in here are kind of almost 90 degrees, which means that we get some corners around here that are a bit too large of a concrete in here. So I decided to put this shape of these curbs or planters, you might call them, around this office building. I kind of figured that maybe in this office building we have some like a mobile phone company or something like that, or internet provider company, and these parks, the planters in there, kind of resembled the shape of the Wi-Fi symbol that you get reception or something like that. So I kind of figured that it might be nice, and obviously it fits to the shape of the building and the intersection around it. So it's kind of all right there. Now we are on the other side of this main avenue in here, and I wanted to start doing something about the bigger park. So that's exactly what we are doing. And the first place that we're going to do here is this. And again, procedural objects, because we needed to customize the buildings quite heavily underneath the park to obviously fit the height, but also the footprint shape of it as well. And as you can see, I'm doing exactly the same thing as with the opposite side. So putting the concrete wall here, some pavement, but that's going to be later covered with the tiles to kind of, like I said before, break the shape, well, not the shape, but the texture of the concrete in these bigger areas. And these buildings were almost the correct height to fit underneath the park, but it's kind of difficult to find the correct heights of multiple types of buildings. So it's obviously much easier to just convert them into procedural objects and just put them a bit taller or smaller as you need. And obviously we had this railroad in here, and we had to kind of create some kind of a corridor through the block of buildings so that the railroad fits. And again, procedural objects are obviously absolutely perfect for that. So you can customize it as you need. Now we had this road in here, this really wide road that was not really going anywhere, but today we are finally going to connect it into the rest of the network, and we will finally see some people on it, on the pedestrian side, and obviously cars in the middle of it. It's probably going to be a very important road, which is going to go obviously into the hill area, but it's also going to connect the residential areas on the side of it, which are kind of going to be done today, at least in here, but more importantly in the next episodes that are obviously going to follow. And we will probably do some connection between the hill area and this place. So that's kind of something that I need to think about, because I don't really want to build it all that super high density residential, just like I'm doing in here. But in here it's kind of making sense because we are very close to the downtown, very close to tall office buildings. So it makes sense that we do tall residential buildings in here as well. But further towards the hill, where we did really low density compared to obviously this place, we kind of need to ease it down somewhat. Anyway, we are continuing with building right underneath the edges of the park. And I really wanted to build like precisely so that the buildings that are underneath, on the surface, well, somewhat on the surface, underneath at least the edges of the park, are really copying the shape of the edge of the park. And these buildings I already used in some previous projects, but they are absolutely perfect because they are very thin, but they look very good, and they can be easily kind of what's the word, stacked. Well, no, that would be on top of each other, but you know what I mean. They can just be put in a row. Yes, in a row, that's the word. They can be put in a very nice row, even a curved row, so that you can fit all kinds of shapes, like I did, I think, with the crater as well, some previous episodes, and maybe somewhere else as well, because those buildings that you can put in a row are always very welcome. Commercial, residential, all kinds of buildings like that. Now, procedural objects again, as I was putting these residential spires or towers in here, they have somewhat a different shaped base. And the base kind of ends exactly where the top of the park is. So I figured that I'm just going to cut this building. I'm going to cut off the residential part of it, I guess, because the lower part kind of feels like maybe some offices or shops or, again, warehouses or something, storage maybe. So I just cut off the residential part of it, at least what I think is residential part, and I'm just going to put the rest of it as this procedural object into the park. Again, matching the shape of the outline of it, which is very important in this place. And these buildings are looking like really futuristic when put like this, and it perfectly copies the shapes. Obviously, it's not completely round. It has sharp corners in here, but overall, it really does match the shape of the park really well. So I'm really glad that this worked out. And the green color is also very nice of it. Obviously, you can't change colors once you convert building into procedural object, because it will get the default color and you can't use the painter mod on it. But the residential buildings, the actual working buildings that are in here around this place I can use the painter mod on, and I decided to just do a different color than green, so I can obviously differentiate between these buildings and they don't look the same. And again, I can easily match the height required for the park to obviously fill from the ground all the way to the lower edge of the park. Now, these buildings I will later put, they are obviously procedural, so they are just decorations, but I will put the blank residential inside it, so people actually use this pavement road around it so that we get some movement on the road, and obviously this place is going to be a bit more lively, alive, and obviously we're going to increase the population of the city as well, which is something that we kind of desperately need. I think that in the previous episode and in today's episode we increased the city's population by like 10%, which is quite a lot, but as I was explaining in the previous episode, we still need to increase the population by quite a lot, maybe like 10,000 at least. And that's 10,000 without building any additional offices or commercial buildings, because we are obviously going to increase the job count as well. And that's kind of something we don't really want at this point, because we still need to find a lot more workers for the for the commercial buildings in the downtown as well, but more importantly for the industrial zone, which is obviously very important, so that industrial zone can make all kinds of goods that we can sell in the city. I don't know if you remember that, but maybe in like episode 4 or 5, I was building a lot of commercial buildings, and they all got those not enough goods signs because no one was really working in the industrial zone. The city actually did not have an industrial zone back in the day. But even when I did build the industrial zone, we still got the not enough goods because no one was really working in the industrial zone because there were just not enough workers, right? But it's definitely getting a lot better lately that we have been increasing the city's population. We have been pretty much doing residential areas in the previous episodes only. So at least like, just a couple of residential just a couple of commercial, a couple of offices, but we have been focusing heavily on residential. So we have been kind of balancing out all the needs of the city. And finally, I can say that the city is, starting to work after 28 episodes. The city is finally starting to work, right? So that's kind of nice. That's kind of nice to see. Anyway, back down here, I was having some issues with that. With those elevation differences, because the wide road, the one that has the pedestrian zones around it, the pedestrian paths around it, and the bicycle path, is obviously going up, so that we need to do something about the elevation difference in here. And I decided to put some really small commercial buildings all around the edges of this road. And then in here I am building some stairs to kind of match the to connect these areas, to connect those areas that are obviously having different heights. And this is always a nice thing to do. It's kind of refreshing to always do these like small detailing projects, and especially stairs like these, something symmetrical as well, because I don't know, it's just kind of nice to do some detailings like that in these bigger areas that don't really have detailing too much on their own. So this is just an ordinary stair area. It's going to be very important because it's pretty much going to be the only connecting place between the main road, the one with the pedestrian things on the side of it, and this residential area. And these residential buildings, they do have a lot of people. There might be even a bus stop or something on that main road. So these stairs are going to be very important. So we will see probably a lot of people walking on them. We don't really see many people on it right now because there's nothing really on that main avenue. But later we are obviously going to see many more people walking in here. And like I said, kind of a nice project to do. Now we had to upgrade all the buildings around it to kind of fit it. This actually took me a long time to figure out the shape, how I need to do it down here, and how to cover it as well. But in the end, it kind of worked out. I put just the procedural grass on top of it, and there were some gaps between the procedural grass and all that. I'm not showing it in these videos too much because I don't really want people to notice it too much. But later, I'm just going to cover all the ugliness of the detailing areas with trees and all the bushes and something like that, flowers as well, because that's obviously much easier than obviously fitting procedural object grass inside the place. It's much easier to just put trees and cover whatever you don't want to see. Now we are back with that like an extension of the park underneath which we built that I don't know how to call it, that nice fitting block of buildings. And on top of it, I am putting this residential building. It's a residential building, but I kind of think about it as some sort of maybe a museum or gallery or something, because it kind of looks like it, you know. It kind of looks like a statue. It doesn't really look like it can hold any people inside it, because I don't know if the individual plates of the building are connected, if there are actually rooms inside it, but it kind of looks like a statue, and it kind of looked nice having it in there, so that I put it there and put the roads all around it. And there's actually going to be an elevator at the end of that road so that people can enter the park area in there as well. Now we are on the complete opposite side of the park, and there needs to be an entrance, and there needs to be a car entrance as well, because there are buildings on top of this park, and unfortunately the game obviously requires road access to buildings. Otherwise, you know, you're gonna have problems like dead people piling up in those buildings, which will obviously also affect the rest of the city, because like hearses won't spawn and all that, and not just those, but garbage trucks as well, and ambulances, maybe police cars, and the overall city is just going to suffer. So we do need to provide road access, and that's actually not a bad thing, because it's a nice opportunity to do some interesting shape of the road. I decided to just make it go underneath the park, but still inside the boundaries of the park, kind of. So it created some sort of a tunnel underneath the edge of it. It doesn't really go anywhere just now, but we are obviously going to connect it later when we get there. Now this road that's going kind of from the residential level to the top here is going to be switched to elevated. Otherwise it would have the terrain edges, which I would need to get rid of somehow, so it's much easier to make it elevated. And now I'm also going to put all these retaining walls with the fence all around this place. In this particular area, pretty much for the fence only, but in here around the park, I'm going to put it because of the wall and the fence as well. And obviously the terrain is going to be kind of cut around, like you can see here, using an ordinary, like a pavement road, which I'm going to use the painter mod on it, so that it can be kind of switched from pavement to just a ruined texture, which I use pretty much like a gravel instead of it. Now we need to create a lot more entrances to the park area, or pretty much do any kind of entrances, because I haven't right now. So I want to do these elevators, and I wanted to do them on the side of the outline of the park. So, and obviously make them functional. So I'm doing all these kinds of pedestrian paths, which are looking really weird right now, but that's obviously just a preparation. And I'm going to just move them inside the elevator building like this, so that it's going to work, but it's obviously going to be hidden. The ugliness of the roads are going to be hidden, and people are probably going to be like on a roller coaster when walking on these roads. It's actually kind of funny. Sometimes I delete, or not delete, but hide the elevator models to just see how people walk on these roads, and it's kind of funny how they just jump up and down. But at the end, when they walk out of these elevator models, it's looking all right. It's actually looking like they are using it properly, right? So that kind of makes up for it. And obviously we need to now match the outline of the park to it. So you could see me do the border in there, which actually took a really long time, because these networks are not really made to be done on a really small scale like that. And also a huge issue with these outline brick roads, or not roads, pavement paths, or paths on the side of the park, they kind of tend to just go to the surface. Like every time you use Move It, well, not every time, but most of the time when you use Move It on some networks around, or even buildings around these paths, when they are elevated above the surface, but they are like surface roads, then they want to just stick like glue. They want to stick to the ground, and you can't really move it with Move It anymore up. So it was really frustrating to do these elevator entrances, because some of these paths were really not behaving well, and I almost decided to not do these entrances anymore and just leave everything alone and not really touch these roads again. But I kind of figured that we do need to have those entrances there, so At the end, I managed somehow. Anyway, we're almost at the end of this episode, but we still have the cinematics to look at. Guys, thank you again for watching this episode, and thank you so much for staying with the Aurelia series. It's really nice to see how many of you are interested in it. We're obviously nowhere near done with it, a lot more episodes to come. One last thing to say, if you guys liked today's episode, I would appreciate if you put a thumbs up underneath it, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and also something that really helps the channel a lot, you can always share the episode or the playlist for Aurelia or the entire channel with someone you think might like this kind of content. That's all from me, enjoy the cinematics, I'll see you next week, and until that time, take care and goodbye.